Welcome in, everybody, to America's Finest Sports. It's Wednesday night. My name's Makana. I also run TTB Ravens Media. My Twitter account is at the Big Makana. What I'm going to be doing tonight is I'm live on TikTok. I'm also live on the America's Finest Sports YouTube channel. Is I'm going to be talking about the NBA as a whole. Now, my goal with America's Finest Sports is just to be able to talk about all the NBA teams that don't get as much media coverage as a lot of the other things. So I may bring up players that you guys don't hear a lot about. I may bring up rookies. I may bring up teams. I may bring up, slept on superstars a little bit more than the national media. But overall, I want to talk basketball and I want to talk real basketball. I don't want to talk about this fake nonsense that we see on all these other platforms. My goal on TikTok, on YouTube is to be able to talk about the things that I feel like are relevant in the basketball world. Now, first off is I'm going to be talking about Kevin Durant to the Celtics. Next off is I'm going to be talking about, the very surprising players from the NBA Summer League. Now, these are not the top picks. I will talk about the top picks in a later segment, but I'm going to be talking about the slept-on players that really balled out that I was impressed by from Summer League. Then I'll get into the top picks, overreactions from, guys like Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, Keegan Murray, those types of players, Jaden Ivey. All those guys, I'll be talking about them as well. But the main goal, talk about the guys that people don't hear about, then to talk about the guys that are at the top of everybody's mind. And then finally, I'll finish off talking about the LA Clippers because overall, I feel like Kawhi Leonard and that question of whether or not they will be able to really get into contention, because the last couple of seasons outside of last year, the Clippers were a really good team. They were a team that were competing for a championship. So when Kawhi comes back, is this a championship contender? Those are the topics I'm going to be running through tonight. I'm doing this all on my own, so hopefully I'm able to keep it going. So let's start off. Let's talk about Kevin Durant and potentially going to the Celtics. I'm also going to be talking about some other teams, some other rumors that I've been seeing, across Twitter, across the national media, and things like that. But I really wanted to talk about Kevin Durant to the Celtics first because I think it's downright ridiculous. I don't think it makes much sense for really either team because when I'm looking at it, the overall trade, what it would have to be is I think if the trade happens, the Nets need Jaylen Brown, which he's on a very cheap contract. Overall, it would be very difficult to happen. But they need Jaylen Brown. They'd probably get back Derek White, to help the contract, money-wise work. Grant Williams. And I've seen 2 first-round picks, unprotected, and then also a pick swap going to the Brooklyn Nets. And when I see that, when I see a trade like that being proposed and talking about sending a guy like Jaylen Brown, who was the number 2 guy on a championship contending team, not just contending, they were in the championship games. They were in the NBA Finals last season. So when I'm looking at those teams, what do they benefit from this? Because the Boston Celtics, obviously they get Kevin Durant. But they lose out on a key piece in Jaylen Brown, who is very cheap and has worked very well in this system, formerly under Brad Stevens. But he has worked very, very well. And I see Hacks in the comments says that he thinks Jaylen Brown was more important than Jason Tatum in the playoff run. And I'm going to say, Jason Tatum, yes, he's their superstar, but Jaylen Brown is not far behind him when it comes to talent, when it comes to production in the NBA. I think he's a very solid player. He's not as good defensively. But the other thing that I've seen out of this trade that a lot of people don't talk about is the Brooklyn Nets, they want Marcus Smart if they're going to make this deal. If the Brooklyn Nets want Marcus Smart, there is no way the Boston Celtics are trading Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown in a deal. Because if you trade Marcus Smart in a deal for Kevin Durant, yes, you get Kevin Durant. Yes, you get a top 5 player in the NBA. Yes, you get a top 3, top 2, maybe top 1 scorer in the NBA. But at the same time, you're losing your best defender. And not just by a slight margin, this other guy will be able to play. No. If you trade away Marcus Smart, you're losing the clear defensive anchor on that team. Not to mention they're also getting rid of their secondary scorer. And in many games, their primary scorer. Because when Jason Tatum is off, they give the rock to Jaylen Brown and he starts finding his stroke. And then eventually they kind of bring Jason Tatum right back into that. But overall, Jaylen Brown, 1-2 punch right there. You look at the bad trades in NBA history, you look at the bad moves that have been made, It's been getting rid of primary assets, a part of an already cohesive unit, to try and bring in somebody new. This is why the Golden State Warriors trade wouldn't work out, right? You can bring in Kevin Durant to the Golden State Warriors. A lot of people say that they have the best potential package. You package Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, James Wiseman. The Nets are listening. They have to be listening. Yes, you can package all those players, but those are players. Like Jordan Poole, massive to that team. James Wiseman was the number 2 overall pick. He's set to be the future. They really believe in him. We saw him in Summer League. He was balling out. When the Nets are trying to make these trades, and they also don't view Jordan Poole as a number 1 option to win a championship, which I would agree with, why would they make a trade for a player that won't... Like, if you're going to make a trade with Kevin Durant, you need a player that you can build around as your number 1. That has to be the goal, right? And if you're looking at it from the Boston Celtics point of view, Kevin Durant, yes, you get him. But is it really worth it for them? I absolutely don't think so. I think Kevin Durant will be a locker room problem. I think he'll be a bigger... I don't think the Nets or the Celtics would be as good with Kevin Durant as they are with Jaylen Brown. Now, looking at the other trades, because there are other deals that KD could potentially end up going to. I think the next biggest behind the Celtics is the Phoenix Suns. That's a spot where Kevin Durant has talked about. That's a place that he would love to go. He wants to go play with Booker and Chris Paul. So that's the other thing, is Kevin Durant's like forcing us away to play with like certain players. So if they're like, well, if the Nets say, well, we need Devin Booker in this deal to get, Kevin Durant over there, KD's like, no, I don't want to go there. I want their main player. So the deal would probably look something like Miles Bridges, Jay Crowder, I don't know, maybe Cam Johnson, and I think like 4 unprotected firsts. Maximum amount of picks. Miles Bridges, who, he's not a build-around piece, but he's definitely a great piece to have if you're building around. This trade is centered around the draft picks. But like when I'm looking at it, like 4 unprotected firsts, right? It doesn't make sense for the Nets to trade for unprotected firsts unless they're other teams' firsts. Because if you give a Kevin Durant to a team, the first round pick, you're not getting, the number 2 overall pick. You are getting 4 years, because Kevin Durant's on his deal for, like 3 more seasons. You're getting at least 3 years of nothing. Like back end first round picks. That doesn't make any sense to do. And then you're having a guy like Miles Bridges, you're having a guy like Mikal Bridges, not Miles Bridges, I apologize. You're having a guy like that who's pretty solid. I think he's a young talent. If you're a championship contender, you would love to have Bridges because he can score the ball, he's very aggressive, and he can play great defense. Number 2 in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. But, he's not a superstar. He's not going to make or break your team, playoffs or not. So, like, that move doesn't make sense for the Nets. There is no move that makes sense for the Brooklyn Nets to make. The final move that I'm going to talk about, logistically in the team, would be the Miami Heat. The other thing about Miami Heat, like I brought up with the Boston Celtics and like I brought up with the Phoenix Suns, Kevin Durant's forcing his way to play with certain players. He has said that he wants to play with, I believe, Kyle Lowry. He wants to play with Jimmy Butler. He wants to play with Bam Adebayo. And I think Tyler Hero was the other guy that he said that he wanted to play with. But the main thing was like he wanted Lowry and he wanted to play with Hero. Well, okay. Okay, Kevin Durant. If you're going to go to the Heat, they have to give up assets. Tyler Hero is probably the best asset that they could trade to the Heat. Now you may be saying, why not Bam Adebayo? I would love Bam Adebayo in Brooklyn. But there's the entire fiasco behind the rookie designated deal. Because you can only have one player on a rookie designated deal in the NBA. The Brooklyn Nets have Ben Simmons. That means they can't trade for Andrew Wiggins. That means they can't trade for Bam Adebayo. This massively restricts what you can do as a team. This is why it was so difficult to get Ben Simmons out of the Philadelphia 76ers organization. Because a lot of teams just cannot get him. Because they already have a player on that designated rookie. So what are they going to do? They can't get the best asset that they could probably trade away in Bam Adebayo. So you got to get Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and I think Kyle Lowry as well. The other thing is, you want those two unprotected first. But again, unprotected first-round picks. This is the Miami Heat. They're already a great team. You add Kevin Durant to them. I mean, this is like pick 28 and up. Like, they're already one of the best, regular season teams in looking at the record. They're like, that's not worthwhile. If you're the Brooklyn Nets and you're trading away Kevin Durant, who on your team automatically makes you a contender every year, Tyler Hero's not doing that. I like Tyler Hero. I'm a big fan of his game. But he's a sixth man right now. You have Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson's really good if you're trying to contend, right? A spot-up shooter. He's not turning a franchise around. Tyler Hero's not turning a team around. Kyle Lowry, very solid player. If you're a contending team, you may want a point guard like Kyle Lowry that's able to do the dirty work, get things done. That's something that we could possibly see. But again, the Nets wouldn't have anybody. So, in my honest opinion, I don't think Kevin Durant's getting traded this offseason, at least not to a team that he wants to go to. Because the Brooklyn Nets, they're in a situation that really sucks for them. Because a lot of times when guys like Kevin Durant want to get traded, right? Those levels of superstars, it's the last year of their deal. So the teams that trade for them, they know, okay, we got to trade for him, then we got to try and re-sign him. We got to extend him, whatever it is. Kevin Durant's on that deal. It is very rare for a player, especially of Kevin Durant's caliber, top 5 player in the NBA, to get traded. Like, just that happening, to get traded, not forcing his way out, just to be traded. It doesn't happen because that is such a valuable contract. You're going to have him for the rest of his prime. So, the assets that the Nets are going to want are going to be astronomical, especially after the deal that happened between the Timberwolves and Jazz. And then if you're another team, like, you just can't give up those assets because they can't even take your designated rookies. Kevin Durant, unless the Brooklyn Nets are able to trade Ben Simmons first, which very difficult to find a trade for Ben Simmons, even though I'm a fan of Ben Simmons. I really like his game. I think he can be a very, very good piece on a contending team in the NBA. If you can't find a trade partner for him, you're not trading KD. Kyrie Irving's a different story. I think you could get rid of Kyrie, if you wanted to send him over to the Lakers and whatnot. Potentially. You could potentially get Kyrie out of there. But if you can't trade KD, why would you trade Kyrie? You have to try and keep them together. You have to do what the Green Bay Packers did and say, hey, why don't we play it out for this season, then we'll decide. That's what they did to Aaron Rodgers. He played it out. He said, you know what, it's not so bad. Let's get that extension. KD wants to leave because he's not winning. That's the reason why KD wants to leave. The reason why he's not winning is because they haven't really been healthy. Maybe they're healthy this year. I don't think KD ends up actually getting traded, especially not in the offseason, because it just doesn't make sense for Brooklyn to do it. And if Kevin Durant really says, I'm not going to play, I think it's more beneficial to the Brooklyn Nets to maybe just say, hey, you know what, we're not going to play. Yeah, that's fine. We're not going to trade you. Is Kevin Durant willing to sit out the rest of his contract, the rest of maybe his prime, the next 3 years? Is he willing to sit out for 3 years of the NBA? I don't think so. I don't think that's something he's willing to do. So basically, the Brooklyn Nets, I think, has the leverage in this situation because they can go out and say, you know what? It's fine. We're not going to trade you. You want to force your way into early retirement, you can do that. Or you can try and play and you can try and win a championship for us because we are trying to build a team around you. They brought in Ben Simmons. They brought in Kyrie Irving. Ben Simmons couldn't play last year. I really like that addition if he could play. If he can play this year, it could work out pretty darn well. Remember what happened in Golden State when they traded for D'Angelo Russell. They played it out for a little bit. They tested it out. They were like, you know what? It's not really working. Let's trade away D'Lo. Let's get ourselves Andrew Wiggins. Well, now we can see KD, and Ben Simmons and Kyrie. I think they tested out a little bit because they hold the leverage with Kevin Durant. They can force him into retirement if they want to. Yeah, KD can strong arm and be like, well, I'm not going to play. You won't win a championship. They can also say, yeah, but trading you away is worse for our future than having, them not playing. Yes, Houston owns a lot of their picks. But if they trade him away and they get the 29th pick in the draft 3 years in a row, like getting the 29th pick versus getting no first round pick is not much of a difference. It's really not. So I don't think KD gets traded because I think they'd rather force him into early retirement. But let's get into the next topic. Off of KD, let's talk about Summer League because I love Summer League. I think it's one of the most fun events to watch in all of sports because you get to really see like the players that you may not get to see a lot in their rookie year. And so I'm going to be talking about players that aren't, the big names. And shout out to the people that joined on TikTok. Shout out to the people watching on, YouTube. But I'm going to be talking about non-rookies, or at least non-big name rookies, because all we hear about is Chet Holmgren. We hear about Jabari Smith. We hear about Paolo Banchero, Keegan Murray, Jaden Ivey. Those are the guys we hear about all the time. I'm going to talk about some players that I feel like really stood out in the NBA Summer League this summer that aren't talked about nearly as much as I feel like they should be. And the next segment, after 15 minutes or so, I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to talk about the big name rookies, the Chets, the Jabaris, all those types of guys. But let's talk about the first guy from the Brooklyn Nets, actually, Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas was one of my favorite prospects coming out of this draft because he was a pure scorer at LSU. He was someone that when I watched him carry that team, especially offensively, I was like, he can carve out a role in the NBA. Now, I don't think Cam Thomas is ever going to be a top 5 player in the NBA. But you don't have to be a top 5 player in the NBA. To be a contributing factor to a team, you just need to be able to do something really well. Whether it's play defense, whether it's, pass the ball, whether it's be the intimidator, the Markieff Morris of the team, the Jay Crowders of the team. Jay Crowder kind of does it all. But Markieff Morris is, he's the intimidator. That's why you have him. Or he can be the scorer. Look at guys like Lou Williams, guys like Jamal Crawford. These are players that were able to come off the bench and put up buckets in short periods of time while the starters got their rest. Cam Thomas is in the perfect situation to do just that. He has Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant in the starting lineup. If he can transcend to become a player that can get real buckets, because last season, per 36, he averaged 18 points per game, or 18 points per 36 minutes. He averaged just over 8.5 points per game in the regular season last year. As a rookie, as a late first-round draft pick. He came out in the Summer League, and I say he should be the point scoring leader of the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. Technically it's Moses Moody, but Moses Moody only played 2 games. I don't think that should count. Cam Thomas played in 5 games. He averaged 27.4 points per game on 44% shooting. He was a bucket. He got to the hole, he drew fouls, and he made his free throws. Scoring is what he does. That's why he was drafted. He was not drafted with any hope of him becoming a defender. He was not hoped. They didn't draft him with any hope of him becoming a two-way or a great passer or a great rebounder or a shot blocker or anything. He was drafted to score the basketball in any way possible. That's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did in Summer League. That's what he did last season. That is exactly what he did last season when he came in. So he's someone that I think is really undervalued when you look at the Nets roster because, yeah, they have Kyrie, they have KD, they have Ben Simmons. That's your point guard, small forward, power forward right there. I think then they should start Joe Harris, even though Joe Harris, very shaky. But they can have Cam Thomas come off the bench and be that spark plug that sometimes they need. Because it's very clear they're not caring about defense in Brooklyn. If this was a team where they were trying to build that, personality of, we're hard-nosed defensive team. No. It's very clear that they don't want to play defense. with the roster that they've constructed over the last couple of seasons. They keep bringing in these centers, that 5-6 years ago they were really good defenders. But, the only defender they really have is Ben Simmons. And Ben Simmons is a phenomenal one-on-one defender. He's a great defender in the NBA. If you go up against a team like the Bucks, at least you have a guy that can guard Giannis. That's all you got. Like, other than that, you're trying to outscore your opponent. Cam Thomas is the type of player that can outscore your opponent. So I feel like he's someone that, kind of goes under the radar, especially as young players go. But I feel like he really stepped up to the plate as like the number one option on that Brooklyn team. Because like I said, they're not going to have good draft picks. They're going to have very late draft picks, and they're going to have to find guys that can do a role and complete that role. I think Cam Thomas could be one of those guys. Next up is Kenny Lofton Jr. Kenneth Lofton Jr. he's a fun guy to watch. He's huge. He's like 6'7", 275 pounds. And he's a center, or came out as a center. I think he probably plays power forward in the NBA. But, he's a big man. He's a big man. Came out of Louisiana Tech. He went undrafted. When I watched him, the biggest thing that I saw that I recognized was how much he works. In the summer league, it's very difficult to find those players. It's very difficult to see the game-changing plays that make or break championship rosters. And I'm not talking about step-back threes. I'm talking about guys that do what needs to be done. Guys like Patrick Beverley, right? If Patrick Beverley, playing in the summer league, that's not a guy where you really notice. Jose Alvarado, right? A guy that just is scrappy. He's always working. He's always putting in that extra little bit of effort. Draymond Green even. Those types of players are difficult to spot in summer league. I'm an OKC fan. The Oklahoma City Thunder drafted Jalen Williams out of Arkansas. That's the type of player he was. You couldn't really tell, though, in summer league that he's working hard. Like, you can kind of, if you're really looking for it. But it's the moments in the big-time games, the prime time, NBA on TNT, you're going up. He's playing for Memphis. This was a team that was in the playoffs last year. They're going to be in big games. He can absolutely come in, and you will see him making hustle plays that frustrate you. If you're a fan of some team that they're playing, maybe you're a Warriors fan, maybe you're a Spurs fan, whoever it is, Lakers fan, you're playing against the Memphis Grizzlies, I guarantee you there's going to be times where it's a 1-point game, 7 minutes left, you feel like you're kind of getting a bit of a run, and then all of a sudden, Kenneth Lofton Jr. comes out, dives for a ball going out of bounds, saves it, runs up the court, catches the ball, and kind of throws a shoulder into your big man. Maybe it's Anthony Davis, a Draymond Green. Gets him off center a little bit and knocks in a difficult layup. Those are the types of plays that he can make. Is he going to average 20 points per game ever in his career? I highly doubt it. But he can shoot the three ball, and he can go out there, and he can work hard, and he can hustle. And what did the Memphis Grizzlies win off of last year? Were they the best shooting team in the NBA? No. Were they the best defensive team in the NBA? Not really. But they were the hardest working team. And that oftentimes leads to defensive excellence. I guess my TikTok stream ended up ending, which I don't really know why. So I'm going to go back here, restart that live. But overall, restarting the live on TikTok. I don't know why that ended. Sorry for the people watching on YouTube. But overall, when you're trying to build a team that wins off of effort, tenacity, and hustle, Kenneth Lofton Jr. is the type of player that you want. Because he is exactly that. And the biggest game that people saw this from was when he went up against Chet Holmgren in the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it looked like he was bodying Chet Holmgren. I guess the TikTok stream is not working. That's kind of weird. But I'll just finish it off on YouTube. So overall, Kenneth Lofton Jr. looked fantastic. He looked like the player that, the type of player that goes undrafted is the guy that plays really scrappy, and he's a bit undersized, and he's a bit overweight. Well, that's Kenneth Lofton, and he puts in more work than anybody else on that floor. And if you're running for a loose ball, who do you want to run into? I can tell you Kenneth Lofton is the last person on that list. Like, yeah, there's scrappy guys like Patrick Beverley, there's scrappy guys like Jose Alvarado, but man, I would much rather run into one of them than Kenneth Lofton Jr., running full speed at you. It's not what you want to hit. It's basically like hitting Zion Williamson. But he's diving at every loose ball, and he's throwing his body around in every situation that he possibly can, and he tires you out. I think he's going to be a really solid player for the Memphis Grizzlies this season. Hopefully he's given a chance to play on the, two-way, or we get to see him in a little bit of games. I would love to see him in the playoffs because he would make a lot of big-time plays. Moving on, though, let's talk about the big rookies, the top 5 picks, the top 4 picks. I'm going to talk about them quickly. I'm an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, so I'm going to start off talking about Mr. Chet Holmgren. I see a lot of takes about Chet Holmgren, talking about a lot of different things. But the biggest thing that I recognize when I hear Chet Holmgren is the size. Oh, he's so skinny. How's he going to guard Embiid? How's he going to guard Giannis? How's he going to guard Nikola Jokic? How's he going to guard Kat? They're going to body him. And I just want to think about that. Because when was the last time there was a rookie coming into the NBA where everyone said, well, how's he going to do against the best player in the world? The best player at that position. Well, he can't guard them. I don't know if anybody's expected to be able to go out and lock up the reigning MVP. Or the reigning, honestly, they're doing the reigning 4 MVPs. They're like, well, you can't lock them up. And the reigning, I think, technically like 6 runners-up, because Embiid's been the runner-up, I believe, 2 years in a row. That's fine. Like, going out and being able to lock up the best player at that position should not be the expectation for any rookie. Nobody drafts a small forward, right? People didn't, the Orlando Magic, they drafted Paolo Banchero. I like that pick. He's the most, NBA ready of the big 3. But it was like, okay, but he can't guard LeBron. He's trash. He can't guard LeBron. Can't guard KD. There's no way he can succeed because he can't guard KD, or LeBron, or Giannis. That people don't say that because they recognize that those forwards are the best players in the world. The best players in the world. Chet Holmgren showcased that he could come in and be the best shot blocker in the NBA this season. His like the way that he would go around, guys would try and do reverse layups, use the rim as protection, and he's just jumping around the rim, swatting it off the backboard. They called one that was goaltending. They called it goaltending. They can't review it. Summer League. It was very obviously not goaltending. He just, pinned it against the top of the glass and then threw it off to the side. Obviously, gave a little bit of a hit the replay on that, but he showcased his defense, and it was fantastic. Now, when people look at that, they're going to look at the Kenny Lofton, Memphis Grizzlies, Oklahoma City Thunder game. And the biggest thing that came out of that was, oh, Chet's getting bodied. Look at this. Look how bad he's playing on defense. All right? That was the national media. That's what everyone talked about. Look at how Chet's getting beat up on by Kenneth Lofton. You can very clearly tell the people that were saying that didn't watch the game. And I really like Kenneth Lofton. I think he played a great game. But nobody looked at what happened on the other side of the ball. Because Chet Holmgren abused Kenneth Lofton Jr. Abused. It looked like he shouldn't be on the floor when he was on defense. Because Chet Holmgren would bring the ball up the court, hit him with a double cross, pass the ball, run inside, run back out of the paint, catch the ball, jab step, pump fake, foul. If this was a real NBA game, Kenneth Lofton Jr. would have been in severe foul trouble very quickly. He had 4 fouls, I believe, in the first half, just trying to guard Chet Holmgren. Because he couldn't do it. He could not move his feet fast enough. He could not be athletic enough to guard a player like Chet Holmgren. And that's why you draft a player like Chet Holmgren, is because when the center is small, he can play defense on him, right? Going against a Rudy Gobert, a skinnier type center, he can guard them in the paint. That's totally fine. But you get up against a Nikola Jokic, one of these really, really big bodies. He's not going to be able to, a Karl Anthony Towns. He's not going to be able to guard them in the paint every play and lock them up. But let me ask you this. What is Nikola Jokic going to do? What is Karl Anthony Towns going to do when Chet Holmgren catches the ball or brings it up the court and starts doing jab steps at the top of the key and then hits his kind of signature cross behind the back side step? I'm going to say that they're going to look lost, and they're going to probably end up fouling him. Because in the NBA, what happens a lot of times is guys like Steph Curry, they force the switch. Chris Paul's fantastic at it. Pick and roll, force the switch, get the big man on you. Why? Because big men can't guard players that are that quick. Chet Holmgren is that quick. And if you're not fully pressed up on him, he has the Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Durant-esque, long arms, shooting formation over the head type of jumper where he will knock it down. He shot 50-40-90. Actually, I think he shot 50-40-95 in the Summer League. He's going to make three-pointers. He's going to make shots. And it's going to be very difficult for players to guard him. And that is the difficult thing when evaluating his play. Is because, yes, he has the weakness. If you are big enough and strong enough, like Zion Williamson, Embiid, Cat, Jokic, you're probably going to have your way on the offensive side of the ball against Chet Holmgren. At the same time, he may still get some blocks. He still got, some blocks on Kenneth Lofton Jr. Like, he was still balling on defense and enforcing very, very difficult shots. You may get your way. You may be able to do what you want to do. But at the same time, when you're trying to play defense on that, it's going to be the same way on the other side of the court. You're going to have a lot of trouble guarding him. And Chet Holmgren showed off great passing, great defense, great shooting, and great just teamwork. The way that he was working with Josh Giddey and, post-game interviews, no, I won't do it unless Josh is here. Show off my teammates, talk about them. It shows that he's trying to build a culture and he's trying to come in and do the right thing. That's what he did at Gonzaga. Drew Timmy's the leader at Gonzaga. He's the vet. Chet Holmgren came in as the young superstar, Jalen Suggs' buddy from high school. Jalen Suggs just left, and he could have walked in there and said, hey, everybody, bow down. I'm the best player on the court. We're going to run through me. No, he said, all right, Drew, what do you got? I want to learn from you. I want to learn from this experience. I want to learn from these guys, and let's try and set a culture. That's exactly what they did. Now, obviously, they didn't end up winning the championship, but they got to March Madness. They made a run. Chet Holmgren's trying to do the same thing in OKC. He's listening to Josh Giddey. He's listening to the coach, and he's listening to his teammates. I think Chet Holmgren is going to be a phenomenal basketball player, and I think that people were overreacting in both ways way too much about his game. But, I'm an OKC fan. I can talk about Chet Holmgren all day long. Let's talk about the next guy. The guy that was the projected number one overall pick, Jabari Smith, because he struggled. He struggled in Summer League. He struggled from three. He shot around 25% from three, and he was seen as one of the best shooting prospects of all time, especially for a forward. All right. For a player his size, he was seen as like Kevin Durant-esque in his shooting ability. His shooting stroke, his shooting form was unbelievable. I watched him at Auburn, and man, was it a lot of fun. Because you could just kick it out to him, and he was, every time, you just had full confidence that he was going to make it. It was like Klay Thompson in Game 6, right? Give him the ball, he's going to be able to make it. He's athletic, he can attack the rim, he can dunk the ball, and he can play some defense. Well, he was not shooting the ball particularly well. Like I said, just around 25% from three in the Las Vegas Summer League. But overall, I felt like he played really solid. I watched a lot of the Rockets games because I like a lot of their young players. Josh Christopher. I was a big fan of Jabari Smith's. I was I was really happy that he and Chet Holmgren were the two guys I wanted in OKC. So I was like happy with either one of them. I wanted Chet, and then I wanted Jabari. So if Chet went first, Jabari Smith, boom. I really like his game. I watched him at Auburn, watching him now. Don't be scared of his shooting numbers. All right, don't be scared. Trae Young struggled from shooting the three ball in Summer League. Now, he did end up hitting the game-winning shot against the San Antonio Spurs in Summer League, but outside of that one, borderline half-court shot that he hit, he struggled mightily from the three-point line. And Trae Young coming out of college was like, oh, wow, this dude's a shooter. A lot of people compared him to Steph Curry, even though he compared himself to Steve Nash, and I think Steve Nash is actually still a pretty good comparison for Trae Young. He struggled. Jabari Smith played very good defense. I felt like he saw the floor really well, and he played really good team basketball, and he rebounded well. Yeah, he struggled from three, but he did everything else. The question marks about Jabari Smith, he answered, actually. Oh, is he going to be able to, dribble? I felt like he dribbled kind of well. He dribbled better than I expected. Is he going to be able to guard these players? He played pretty solid defense. He was guarding Chet Holmgren. He looked pretty good. I liked what I saw on the defensive end. He was getting blocks. He was getting some steals. He's going to be able to pass the ball. Yeah, he was passing the ball pretty well. I felt like he was moving the ball really well, and he wasn't forcing things to come out of his own hand. Those are the questions. The question was never shooting. I guarantee you he's going to be one of the best rookie shooters in this draft because now he's not the primary focus of the defense. In Summer League, he was the number one guy. When teams were like, okay, we're going up against the Houston Rockets, what do we got to stop? Jabari Smith, number one. Then you can focus on Josh Christopher. Well, this year, he's playing for the Houston Rockets. It's going to be stop Jalen Green. It's going to be stop Kevin Porter Jr. And that's going to allow Jabari Smith open for three. And it's going to be very scary to watch. I can tell you the Houston Rockets may not be the best team in the NBA. They're probably going to lose a lot of games. They may be in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. But there will be games against really good teams where the good teams lose. Maybe it's the Warriors. Maybe it's the Celtics. Maybe it's the Heat. They will be a difficult team to beat because there will be games where 2 or 3 of those guys is hot. Those are all pure scorers right there. They're all pure shooters, and it's going to be very difficult to defeat them when they're all feeling it. They're going to have a lot of games like that this season. I'm really excited to watch the Houston Rockets play over the next couple of seasons with their young assets. And don't be worried about Jabari Smith Jr.'s shooting numbers. That's, it's a 7-8 game sample size. I think they played in the in the earlier summer league, but he only played in, I'll pull up the number of how many games he played in the Las Vegas summer league. I think he played in 3 or 4. He played in 5. But number 2 overall in rebounds. Oh, number 2 overall in defensive rebounds. Taco Fall leading in rebounds. But he's going to be fun. Next up, I'm going to talk about Keegan Murray. I've seen a lot of overreactions about Keegan Murray, both ways, because he came out and I feel like he did exactly what I was expecting him to do. Exactly what I was expecting him to do. Did he put up great numbers? Absolutely. He looked fantastic. He looked like he honestly didn't deserve to be on the court at a lot of times. He averaged 23.3 points per game, 50% shooting, 40% from the field, or 40% from 3, 80% from the line, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, one steal a game. Looked pretty good. It was very, exciting. But at the same time, that's what we knew he was going to do. He was the most NBA-ready prospect in this entire draft. So we cannot judge whether or not the Sacramento Kings made the right pick off of Summer League. Because guys like Jaden Ivey, Chet, Jabari, Paolo, none of them were at the level for the NBA as Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray at Iowa led the country in scoring. He was maybe the best player in all of college basketball. Right after Luka Garza was the best player in college basketball. He is ready to take the NBA. He's a little bit older than the other guys, but he came out there and he did what I expected him to do. So, when you're seeing a guy that does the expected, that means that we can't judge it. If he went out there and he was averaging 45 points per game, I'd be like, okay, he did above expectation. But he was like, oh yeah, he looked pretty solid. He looked like a good NBA player already. That's what he was drafted to be. That's why they went with him over Jaden Ivey. They wanted someone a little bit sooner that could ball out. A little bit sooner. They have Domantas Sabonis. Now they have Keegan Murray. They have De'Aaron Fox. They're like, okay, we got a couple of, borderline all-stars. Let's get ourselves a good rookie. Maybe we can make a run at it. Now, do I think they will? Probably not. The West is really tough at the back end. But they're making a chance. Jaden Ivey might have taken a little bit longer to try and get into that. So, let's talk about the final number 1 overall pick, Paolo Banchero. I think he looked really solid. He just looked well-balanced. He looked, again, all of these guys, except for Jabari Smith, looked like they were advertised to be. Jabari Smith, wasn't shooting the ball well. But Chet Holmgren came out shooting well, blocking shots, playing defense. Keegan Murray scoring the basketball like the best of them, playing really solid basketball. Paolo Banchero came out, all-around versatility. That's what he brought. 20 points per game, 40% from the field, 50% from 3, 80% from the line. He was averaging 10 attempts per game. He only played 2 games, but, averaged 4 rebounds, 3 assists, almost 2 steals, and almost 2 blocks. Pretty solid. Pretty solid overall, well-balanced numbers from the number 1 overall pick. I feel like the Orlando Magic, it'll be too hard to tell whether or not they made the right or wrong pick until a couple years into the future when we can really gauge everything. But, the top 3 players were known. They could have gone with any of them, and I feel like they would be a good selection. They went with the well-balanced, maybe the safest selection out of the big 3, but at the same time, safest doesn't mean worst. I think a lot of people get confused by that. Paolo Banchero could very easily be the best of all of them, even if they all play above expectations. He's a well-balanced, versatile scorer that has the body to be a really solid defender. And he showed it. Good job, Magic. Based on the Summer League, they look like they did a pretty good job. But let's get into kind of the final segment, and I'm kind of sad that the TikTok Live, for some reason, shut down. Overall, I feel like Summer League was a lot of fun to watch. If you guys don't watch Summer League, I highly recommend it. It's a ton of fun, but don't overreact to everything. But let's talk about Kawhi Leonard. Let's talk about the LA Clippers and whether or not they can be legitimate contenders and competitors in the Western Conference. Because I think a lot of people forget about this team. Because you look at the playoffs last year and you're like, okay, who were the repeat teams? Obviously, you have the Golden State Warriors who won the NBA Finals. You have the Memphis Grizzlies who are getting more experience, from John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Dylan Brooks, and everybody else. Desmond Bane. You have teams like the Denver Nuggets who are going to be getting Jamal Murray. They've got Michael Porter Jr. and obviously the MVP in Nikola Jokic. I don't think he should have won MVP, but that's another topic, to talk about. You got all these teams. You got the Lakers. Oh, they're going to have a healthy LeBron. They have Westbrook. They have AD. If they're healthy, maybe we can see if they can do it this year because they, off and on injury for LeBron and AD all of last season. Westbrook played, I think, 79 games. So you look at those teams, you're like, all right, that's the West. That's the competition. You're forgetting about one team. The team that has been the most consistent contender over the last 3 years. The LA Clippers. They've been the team that has given so many of these teams a lot of trouble. Why? Because they've got 2 superstars. And I still believe Paul George is a superstar. They've got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, both two-way phenomenal basketball players. Shout out to Gil. Yes, the Clippers, they are completely overlooked. And I feel like the last couple of seasons going into the year, everyone's like, oh my gosh, the Clippers, they're so good. And they're like, oh, they're a top 3 contender. I think the Clippers are a legitimate top 5 contender in the NBA. They signed John Wall, which I'm not looking at this team like, oh, they added John Wall. Wow. Because it's not prime John Wall. John Wall is an asterisk. He's a question mark. We don't know exactly what he's going to be because he really hasn't had a chance to play competitive basketball since like 2017, maybe 2018 when he had that injury. We haven't gotten to see John Wall in a long time. He's probably going to be a little bit injured. He's going to, have to shake off the rust. But they're getting Kawhi Leonard, and they have Paul George. Paul George wasn't on the Clippers for most of the year. He missed like the second half of the season. And the Clippers got to a point where they were in the play-in. And this was a team being led by Terrence Mann, Ivica Zubac, Nick Batum, Marcus Morris, and Robert Covington. They added Luke Kennard. They have Reggie Jackson. But like this was a team where it was like, when you look at the rosters and you're like, oh, what team are they competing against? And it's like, oh, the Pelicans, who have Brandon Ingram. They got CJ McCollum. They've got, obviously they have Zion, but he wasn't playing. Then you go, okay, what are the other teams? Oh, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Oh, well, they have Karl Anthony Towns and they have Anthony Edwards. And it was like, how are the Clippers here? Like, they don't have Paul George. They don't have Kawhi. What are they doing? It doesn't make any sense. Well, now they have that back end of the roster. And I think this is a really well-balanced team. A really, really well-balanced team that is going to be frustrating to play. Because, oh yes, they also have, or had Norman Powell. They still have Norman Powell. But this is a team where they got shooters that are also defenders and they're athletic. Very rare breed of player, but they have a lot of them. They've got maybe a top 3 defender in the NBA in Kawhi Leonard. I think Paul George is a top 10 defender in the NBA, regardless of position. Then they have Robert Covington, who's maybe the best 3-and-D player in the NBA when it comes to versatility. Because he is a phenomenal shot blocker on the defensive end of the ball. I mean, he's big and he can shoot the ball like crazy. He finished the season shooting 50% from 3 over the last 10 games. Regular season last year, 38% from 3. And this is adding in the blocks, the steals, and the big-time plays that he's made. He played center in a lot of games for the Portland Trail Blazers when he was there. He's played center for a lot of the teams that he's played because he can just do it all. He's one of those guys in the body and the athleticism and the skill set that can really guard any position, maybe outside of point guard. And he's coming off of your bench. Now, maybe you start him at the power forward spot instead of Nick Batum. You can kind of switch it out, but he's coming off your bench. So you've got one guy that, versatile, defender, scorer coming off the bench. It's always nice to have. But let's see, who else do they have coming off the bench? Well, they have Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson's been a starting point guard in the NBA for years. And is he the best player? No, but he's solid. He's going to go out there, he's going to manage the game, he's going to shoot well from the free throw line, he's going to pass the ball, he's going to be a solid NBA player. Right? Last year, he averaged 16.8 points per game. Shot just over 32% from 3, just under 40% from the field, but he was like arguably the number 1 option for half the season. You don't want him to be your number 1 option, but a backup point guard? Reggie Jackson is a great backup point guard to have. Then you add in Norman Powell, who can play really, really good defense. He can score the ball really well. He's going to be guarding your shooting. He's going to be playing the shooting guard spot. Fantastic person to have, especially coming off the bench. Like, this is a guy that can start on a contending team, and you'd be like, that's a solid starter. Like, you would not look at him and be like, oh, wow, they got Norman Powell in the starting lineup. No. You're looking at that like, oh, man, and they have Norman Powell? Well, he's coming off the bench. With Reggie Jackson, who was a starter last year. So all of a sudden, you're like 2 guys that could be starters on contending teams. Then you look at it and you're like, okay, who's next? Oh, it's Marcus Morris. Marcus Morris is a good shooter. He's a good defender. He's a good facilitator. He's a well-balanced player. Again, another player that you could look at and say, hey, wow, he's starting on a championship team. You're not looking at that and being like, wow, this is bad. They're starting Marcus Morris and they're trying to win the finals. No. You're looking at that like, and they got Marcus Morris. You know, a two-way facilitator, shooter, scorer, very good player. This team, the bench, is full of players that can be starters on contending rosters. And they're on the bench because the starters are guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And potentially John Wall. Reggie Jackson may end up starting for, a lot of the season. But if John Wall can come back and be, a decent vet, that's just adding to the fire. This is a team that you don't want to play because they're going to play great defense and they're going to hit a lot of threes. And that's always the most frustrating team to play, right? Just like the Golden State Warriors, right? Golden State Warriors, they play great defense, they hit a lot of threes, and that's how they beat you. Well, now there's another team that does that, and they have, in my opinion, better defenders. They don't have better shooters. You can't get better shooters than Steph and Clay. But they have better defenders in Kawhi and Paul George than Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green are. This is without a doubt a contender. I think there's a case for them. I think they may be the best team in the West right now. I think they are probably a better team than the Warriors. Now, this is assuming Kawhi Leonard comes back and he's healthy. If Kawhi Leonard comes back and he's a shell of himself, scrap this whole segment. It doesn't count if he's completely hurt. But if he comes back and he's Kawhi Leonard, like Kevin Durant came back from his injury and he's still Kevin Durant, this is the best team in the West. This is the team that is going to win consistent games. And yeah, it's going to be one of those teams that Kawhi Leonard sits out a game, Paul George sits out a game, and they're still going to beat you. Like, yeah, it's nice when they sit out, but they're such a well-rounded, well-balanced team. The depth is just going to overwhelm so many teams because their bench is going to be better than any other bench in the NBA. And their starters are arguably a top 5 starting group in the NBA. They have a top 3, maybe top 5 duo in their 2 superstars, right? You look at the top superstars, LeBron, AD, I don't know, Curry, and I don't know who's the number 2 on the Warriors. It's not really Clay. I don't know. It's Curry and Poole or Draymond or Clay or Wiggins, whoever you want to say there. Giannis and Middleton, I think, is probably better. KD and Kyrie. I would take Kawhi and Paul George over KD and Kyrie because they play fantastic defense and they give you almost the same amount of offensive production. I say almost because KD and Kyrie are unbelievable scorers, but Kawhi and Paul George can get the ball in the basket. Paul George was a former top 3 MVP and top 3 Defensive Player of the Year player in OKC in 2017. This is not a team to be sleeping on. This is not a team to be forgetting about. This is not a team to look at without their top 2 players. Kawhi and Paul George miss a game. This is not an easy win. This is not, bet all your money, they're going to win this game. And I see Gil bringing up in the comments, yeah, they still have Brandon Boston, Luke Kennard, Amir Coffey. This is a deep team. All of those players are like deserving NBA roster players. And I didn't even mention them yet because that's how far back they are. They also have Terrence Mann. It's just a really good team. It's just a really good team. They're not going to be flashy. They're not going to overwhelm you. They're going to play defense, and they're going to win. It's going to remind you a lot, I think, of the San Antonio Spurs, who was the leader of that team, late, in the 2012 to 2015 era. It wasn't Tim Duncan. It wasn't Tony Parker. It wasn't Manu Ginobili. It was a young man by the name of Kawhi Leonard, who every year was in the top 3 MVP voting. He's also winning Defensive Player of the Year, it seemed like, every year. Because he just did his job. And nobody talks about him. Because he just doesn't force anybody to. He's not going out and tweeting wild things. He's not saying wild things in press conferences. He goes to work, does his job, goes home, and we don't hear from him. Right? Kawhi Leonard's been hurt forever. When was the last time you heard anything about Kawhi Leonard? It's probably when he got hurt. Right? Like that's him. He just doesn't cause drama. He doesn't cause controversy. And that's one of the best things about him is like he just goes so under the radar. When I see people making top 10 lists in the NBA, I never see people put Kawhi anymore. Because like they just completely forgot about him. And I don't blame them. There's some guys like Kevin Durant. When Kevin Durant was injured, we heard from KD. Right? Like everyone was still putting KD in their top 10 lists. Because he's on the top of your mind. Kawhi Leonard's just like chilling at home. He's probably like watching some, he's watching like Glee or something like that. And he's just kicking back. Maybe he's going on some nature hikes. I don't know. I don't know what he does. But he's not forcing anyone to hear about him. He's just like, yeah, I'm going to be me. I'm going to show up to my job and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it as good as anybody else in the NBA can. He may be the best two-way player in the NBA still. And and there's a guy named Giannis Antetokounmpo in the NBA. Don't sleep on Kawhi Leonard. Don't sleep on the Clippers. This is not a team that you want to play. All right, guys. I think this is probably going to be it. I'm kind of sad still that the TikTok live, it just ended after like 25 minutes or so. And I tried to restart it and it just instantly ended again. So I don't really know what exactly happened, but I'll try and get that fixed for next time. It was a lot of fun talking NBA. I love talking basketball. First time doing an hour-long really recording without any questions or, I just went out here and I talked and I had a lot of fun doing it. So I'm excited to be talking NBA for America's Finest Sports. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to try and bring on guests, but if you guys ever have any questions, join the Discord, which is going to be in the description down below. Join the Discord and, talk basketball, talk baseball, talk football, talk whatever you want. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see all of you again next time.